Invite Susan, Naji, and Fadi to come up, and I'm going to say a few things about them so that we're familiar. If you can make yourselves at home right here. Kind of nice and close here.
Are we going to sing?
I think so. As I started off by saying, this is the 7th event that the U.S.-UAE Business Council has done here at the USA Pavilion. And it's really amazing that the event that we're ending on, the panel that we're ending on, is such an important topic, sustainability, water, conservation of the most precious resource that we have. So I'm really honored to be here, to be moderating this event. In a way, I'm glad Danny is not here. Danny Seabright, the president of the U.S.-UAE Business Council, is back in the States, and I am filling in for him. The events that we've done here are events that have been focused on U.S. technology and U.S. technology and innovation. We've tried to showcase from the Business Council the innovation that U.S. companies are bringing to this region and the partnerships that those innovations, those opportunities offer for the U.S.-UAE relationship. And this event is no different. This panel is no different. The three companies that we have brought together here are leading in this field. Naji is with Xylem. Every time I drive by, from here to Abu Dhabi, I see his building and it says, "Let's solve water." I've even been in the car and the kids always say, "What does that mean, let's solve water?" So when I was talking to them about this event today, my 13-year-old daughter says to me, "Maybe you can find out what they mean by that." So that's the discussion we're going to have with Xylem. All the innovative technologies that they bring in this space, and also maybe focus a bit more on what those partnerships look like here in the UAE in that space. Fadi, I had the great honor of hanging out with Fadi about a week ago at a fellows event we did. He was telling me about the great innovations they're doing in vertical farming and urban farming. The key phrase for, I think, Aerofarms is they save 95% of water use compared to traditional farming. I think Fadi is going to tell us all about the innovations that they're doing here. They have amazing facilities in Abu Dhabi, but we're really looking forward to hearing about how that translates into the larger, how do you scale that up? What does that mean for traditional farming? What can we take from those innovations into the broader space? And Susan, I read your bio and the amazing work that you've been doing on water. Jacobs has, I think your water practice is about 9,000 people strong. Lots of innovation, focused on data solutions, focused on technology in this field. As I was saying to Susan earlier, I had the great honor of being here on Monday for a breakfast event that Jacobs hosted, talking about their corporate strategy. And what was amazing to me is that the whole strategy started off with changing corporate culture and talking about inclusion and diversity. We're not going to go there today, but it was very exciting for me. But another thing that they really focused on was climate response. I think it's one of the 3 core pillars that you talked about as climate response being one of them. And I know your practice fits right into that discussion. And the other thing that stuck with me that Marietta said was about how ESG is now going to be a feature of every project that Jacobs is going to do. So I'm going to look to Susan to tell us more about all of those things. To get us started, to break the ice, I'm going to start with Susan and we'll go down this way. Maybe you start off with what are the greatest challenges that we're facing in this space and what you think are the best solutions. And then we'll get into what Jacobs does specifically. Each of you want to get started.
Sounds good. Can you hear me okay? Well, I have to just start off with thanking you for having me here. And when I walked down that big avenue and I saw this building, I saw the stars. And I have to just share with you, it kind of caught me. I kind of gasped a little bit. My son's a Marine Corps officer, and he commissioned in June. And every time I see the flag now, I kind of have to take a moment. That's what America means to me. And so I'm going to start with that from the standpoint of It means that we have to look big. It means that we have to think bigger than ourselves. I'm a civil engineer. I've been a civil engineer for almost 36 years, starting out my career in a sewer department in Middle America, in Cincinnati, Ohio, where at that time we had paper maps. We had paper maps that we tried to understand what was happening, and our main job was to make sure that the sewage got from the homes to the treatment works, and it didn't overflow into the river, and it didn't back up into the homes, and it did that quite a bit. We really didn't have an opportunity at that time to look outside of what we were doing. Now, as we look at the world, we look at water in a totally different way. We don't talk about it as sewage anymore. We don't talk about it as drinking water anymore. We don't talk about it as storm water. We talk about it as one water. And so I think that's where we need to be today. We need to look at it from a one water standpoint. My team, my global team, tells me all the time, you know, we're drinking the same water that the dinosaurs did. Now, I always have an ugh factor when they tell me that, but it is true. And if we think about this, we tend to think that we're making something, but we're not making anything. We need to be water managers. And if we're going to manage our water, we've got to think about it as one water. So that's where I see the challenges today, I see the opportunities, and that's where we're heading.
Thank you, Susan. Fadi, any thoughts on this?
Yep, of course. So just following on what Susan had started with, so the importance of water and how critical this resource is for our livelihood on this planet. So there's no planet B, as we say. This is all what we have. And currently, it's forecasted that within 2050, we're going to have more than 9 billion people living on this planet, and 80% of them are going to be moving to live in urban areas, in urban cities, which would put lots of pressure on all our supply chains, specifically the critical ones from energy to water and to food, which really pushes us to look into alternative methods to feed the masses and to provide the nutrients to human beings, not just numbers of calories through sugar or something which is not healthy. So knowing that the technology that we have developed over the past decades have allowed us to start practicing with indoor farming and with vertical farming, the impact of this technology has proven to be critical for saving water and providing healthy nutrients. Nature is not there yet. So the technology is there, but nature is not there yet. So we cannot provide all type of crops or produce that human beings love to consume or would wish to consume. So the effort is still at its infant stage, and lots of efforts and collaborations, partnerships are needed to push those limits in order to enhance this industry and preserve water and provide food.
Thanks. Naji, talking about one water and what Fadi said about conservation, I know Zalam is also very involved in this One Water initiative that it says very close to Susan's heart, I know. Talk to me a little bit about how your technologies play in this particular field.
Well, look, we're in the business of moving water and analyzing it, measuring it, and treating it. That's the product portfolio, the technology portfolio and solutions that we put to play, that we offer. And, you know, I think you were talking about the importance of water and the fact that it is still the same resource that we've been using since the dinosaurs. But also that reminds me that we are in the middle of the desert. And, you know, with an increasing population, you know, more and more people are moving to this part of the world, and which obviously puts more strain on water resources. And our ability, you know, to comment to your kids' remarks earlier, our ability to solve for water becomes crucial, becomes very important. You know, water is a very finite resource in this part of the world, and our job is to assist municipalities, governments, utility companies to be able to move it from where it sits into the urban areas and then circulate it within the cities and make sure that its inhabitants have the access to water in a steady manner, in a clean manner, in a pure manner. So
what about, let's talk a little bit about the specific technologies that you're bringing to the UAE and to countries like this where there is such a shortage of water, and the efficient use of water becomes even more critical. I mean, in the U.S., we tend to be not, in the desert cities, yeah, we're more concerned about it. But in general, in the U.S., we tend to be less concerned. But a place like this, it's hard to forget that water is a precious resource. There's a lot of education that needs to go with that. But what about technology specific to conserving and efficiently using water that you bring to places like this? Susan, first.
Sure. So if you look at this from a One Water standpoint, so I mentioned that when I worked for a sewer department that we had paper maps. And I remember the day that we got GIS, Geographic Information Systems. And I remember that wow factor when we thought, wow, we could actually look at this in a different way. But that gave us a horizontal look at things. That gave us the ability to look at this from a spatial standpoint. Very quickly realized that every bit of that information was also vertical, and that every manhole, every pump station, every pipe, we also had real data there. And that's when you really start to use the technology in a different way. I was also the project manager for the development of the hydraulic model, and that gave us time series data. We got to see what happened over time. So if you think of that from a spatial standpoint, a vertical standpoint, and a change in time standpoint, that's what we've got to bring with the technology. And so what Jacobs is bringing to our clients is a suite of tools called Replica. And Replica starts at a very high level, and Replica models that complete water cycle. And I like the way you mentioned we probably don't understand as well as we should in America the importance of water in a really water scarce region like we are here. But we're starting to see a lot of water scarcity in the western part of the United States. And we're starting to look at what's happening when we don't have enough water. And how are we going to take that water and treat it as one water? So our Replica platform does that. We tie in our hydraulic models to that. We're able to then run the system as one water, one system. The things that I'm most excited about, though, are artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that's a tough field, but it's where we need to be. And it's tough because as you start to move from operating something as an operator, as a human being, as a person, and you're teaching the machine to do that, well, first of all, you got to believe it. And then the operator has to believe it. And if they believe it, then it will work. So that's where I'm seeing this going. It's exciting time to be in water and exciting time to be at Jacobs.
Thanks. Xylem, what about Xylem and what you're doing here in the UAE and the partnerships you have? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I mean, we're in this various stages of moving the water and analyzing it and then eventually treating it. But, we notice also that most of the utility companies around here, suffer from loss of revenue and loss of water, mostly through metering challenges. And so, we're there assisting them in smart metering solutions, not only to solve for these challenges, but also for improving customer satisfaction. And then behind that, there's a lot more that happens from hardware to digitalization, similar to what Susan just mentioned. But from pumping the water from the sea, after the desalination plant and so on, sending it through the systems, and into the residential complexes, pushing it inside buildings, measuring it, analyzing it, treating it, disinfecting it, making sure it's free of pathogens and is good for human consumption. Not so much drinking, but at least for washing and regular usage. And so we have these various touch points, and then on top of that, we're able to kind of provide for digital solutions for utility companies to help them make sense of, as you said, of all this data that we gather. We have on every pump station, every analytical tool, every metering station, those are all data points that we're able to use and put at the disposal of our customers and the utility companies so that they can run their water networks in a more intelligent and more sophisticated manner, in a way that basically enhances the optimization of these of that infrastructure. You know, as I think you mentioned that earlier, 70% of the Earth's population is expected to move into urban areas by 2050. And these are cities that we know of, you know, they exist today, and that have infrastructure in place, maybe old infrastructure, and unfortunately it's an infrastructure that historically has suffered from anemic investment levels. And so it becomes crucial, as with this acceleration of urbanization and the pressure that it has on the system, you know, how do we help utility companies and governments and municipalities to run a more effective system, run a more, you know, more intelligent network in place. And, you know, we do talk about the managers of these companies, of the utility companies, and they want to hear also from us about our technology and our solutions and our integrative approach towards, for example, detecting leaks in the system in a precise manner, and helping dispatch maintenance crews to these breaking points in the network. Make sure that they know where the breakpoints is. As you know, a lot of these networks are underground, so a lot of technology is put at the disposal of these companies that is produced or manufactured by Xylem to be able to detect where these breakpoints is, and then send a crew to solve them. In addition to that, you know, the worry about or the elimination of the risk of contaminating clean water with sewage water or with storm water, and all the technology that goes behind that, and the ability and the solutions that a company like Xylem, like we do, and we provide and we put at the disposal of the governments around the GCC in particular, and obviously globally as well.
Yeah. I feel like what you and Susan bring and what Fadi brings are like two sides of the coin when it comes to water conservation. It's one thing to have the data solutions to make use of water more efficient, whether that's in a residential capacity or in an industrial capacity. And the other side of the equation is industry making sure that their processes are more efficient, like Fadi's company, right? Fadi, talk to us a little bit about how do you use innovations in water usage and apply it to your industry, and how does that apply to other industries?
So at Aerofarms, our main technology is aeroponic. For those who don't know aeroponic, so we grow crops and produce without soil and without water. So it sounds magic, but in reality, it's just science and some enabling technologies. When it comes to the water aspect, as Rachel mentioned in the introduction, so we do plan to saving 97% of water. These versus the traditional agriculture. These savings go into specifically 3 areas. In the production savings, statistically, it takes about 250 liters to grow a lettuce in the open market. This is the water efficiency in the open fields. On our platforms, it's 1 liter of water per 1 kilogram of lettuce. So the efficiency is almost 2,000%. Also, we use misting, so we don't use water. There's no leaking. There's no excess of water. So we mix our nutrients and then in a dosing system, and then it's driven up to those shelves, and then the roots are being misted. And the efficiency of absorption of the roots is at its best. The environment of our farms is a clean room environment, so there's no pathogens, there's no pesticides, herbicides, chemicals, nothing. So this is where we go into the other aspect of water savings. There's no need to clean the produce from chemicals or pathogens or pests after the harvest. So this is the second area of saving. And the third area of saving is when it comes to greens and leafy greens specific, 40% goes into spoilage. So whatever the farmer harvests, only 60% of that gets to the shelves in the supermarkets. We avoid that by controlling the quality of the produce that we're producing and by being very close to the supermarket. There isn't much vertical farms around the world, but statistically for those existing ones, it's between 35 and kilometers trip from harvest to the customer, while all around the world it's ranged in the area of 1,500 kilometers from the production to the customer. So this is the process of production. This is where we actually save water, but also technology have enabled us in two other areas. So we capture the humidity from our farm and we recycle it into our water line. And also we recycle our own water to go for 1 or 2 or 3 cycles, depending on the level of nutrients and toxicity in that water. So we don't only use a little bit, but whatever we use, we're making sure that it's being utilized to the maximum.
That's amazing stuff, isn't it? Fadi, this is the kind of stuff that I think the collaboration between the technology companies and the actual end user that's actually using water, can come together. Susan, why don't you take it from there and tell us, give us some examples of where Jacobs provides innovation, not just in the sort of residential and working with utilities, but in the industrial space. How are you bringing efficiencies there?
Right. Thank you. That's a good question. So, and it builds upon this concept of one water. If we look at a one water cycle and then we bring that to our industrial clients, they actually are much more advanced than some of our municipal clients are in making use of this technology. And here's why. A lot of times for our municipal clients, not one entity is responsible for the whole water cycle. So you're dealing with different parts of the municipality. Maybe it's a state government, maybe it's a local government. But when we bring such as Replica that I've mentioned, where we can look at the full water cycle, build a digital twin for an industrial client, they can make use of that. And so that's what we're bringing to them, is the ability to understand how their water is being used, how are they going from wastewater to recycled water to then product water and back again, and that then is how we're helping them.
Naji, I'm going to ask it slightly differently from what I said to Susan. You're doing work with municipalities, you're working with DEWA and so on, and you said something about, the water that you're treating, making sure, that sewage water is being treated and, it's being used in homes for washing or cleaning or whatever, but not for drinking or whatever, or for fertilizing the plants. There's a lot of education that needs to go with that, because I think people aren't quite ready for some of this, treated water being used in different ways. And I think we've talked to DEWA and the municipalities here about taboos that exist around water use. What roles do companies like yours have and what are you doing about trying to help people understand, or municipalities understand, the proper use of water? And I'll ask Susan the same question in a second.
Well, look, unfortunately, we're not yet at the level where we're using used water back into the consumption for humans. But today, we do help DEWA and other utility companies around the region and municipalities to help reuse treated water for plants, for irrigation. As you know, it does carry a lot of the essential nutrients and materials that are used by plants to grow. So today, this is how used water is being utilized. But to answer that question in a slightly different manner, maybe 10 years ago, this was all wasted water. This was water that was just flowing back into the rivers, sometimes not necessarily treated to the extent possible. And today, there's a lot more focus from the municipalities. I mean, if you take DEWA in particular, they have the Water Smart initiative, which is basically compelling and asking. It's like call to action for utility companies and the general public for a more intelligent use of water. And so this is one good example of how to utilize the treated water or the sewage treated water back into some of the agricultural applications. Also, for instance, one of the technologies, actually one of the products that I'm personally proud of, because we have created it here in our manufacturing facility in Dubai, which was a specific application for mosques around the GCC. As you know, there are many mosques around the GCC, and one of the religious practices in those mosques is the ablution, is to clean before the prayer. And so this dirty water today, through our technology, is taken again out, purified, cleaned, and then put back into the landscapes around the mosques to make sure that it is put to good use. Maybe in the past, the same thing used to happen, but with twice as much water. So the used water would come out of the mosques and finds its way back into the system, and then an additional amount of water, clean water, is used to irrigate the plants. So these are some of the technologies that we are developing in the region, for the region, to be able to deal with some of the water challenges, try to increase water reuse, and to minimize water loss.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. It's not just the technology, but it's the education that goes with it to understand that it is okay to be able to do this. Susan, talk to us a little bit from your experience.
Well, I'm going to give you an American example. When we realized that we had to deal with the UGG factor, the fact that you're going to ask somebody to drink water that has been recycled, we made beer out of it. And so we started a competition at our biggest water conference, which is WEFTEC, and people competed to make beer out of recycled water. And every year, it's a big event, I have to tell you. And it's very competitive. And what's even more fun is the naming of each of these beers. So that was a path. But all joking aside, that is, the education of it is tough. You're trying to explain to somebody, first of all, where that water came from. And so in some communities, that's just not going to fly. So we take the recycled water and we put it in a reservoir and then pull it out of the reservoir. And so it seems like just that separation of not going directly to your tap is working. But I still think the beer idea was a good one. So.
Can we sample some of it here at the U.S. Pavilion?
I don't drink beer, so I'm going to have to have others on my team to manage that for me. So sorry.
I'm on board. I'll participate in this. Fadi and Naji, both of you talked about the growing population in this region and people moving to urban centers. The places that used to be the desert before are now thriving cities. Obviously, that comes with a tremendous amount of challenge for the environment. But we all understand the challenges. From your perspective, what technologies and innovations are you working on toward looking at the future that you see as opportunities for this region? Fadi first, and then Naji.
So, as I spoke earlier about Aerofarms and aeroponic and vertical farming, for the rest of the world, mainly for the US and for Europe, it has been a question of sustainability, conservation of resources. For this region, it takes a different slant. There's a food security dimension to that. And this is where we are being involved. So we did not come to the region and just build the largest farm in the region like everybody loves to do. What we did is we came in and built an R&D center in Abu Dhabi. And this R&D center will house a state-of-the-art laboratories for plant science in order to enhance the local seed that's being used by local farmers to build more resilience to pathogens, to drought, to salinity in soil. So that's one area. The other area is to cultivate new type of crops that could yield and make it more economically feasible to be grown on our shelves in a vertical farm, because as of now, we have researched 500 types of crops and leafy greens. Only 30 respond well on those shelves, okay? Nature is not equipped yet to survive or to give the best it can without soil and without water. So we're still practicing with that, and there's lots of trials to be taking place. So this is from a plant science aspect, and we have several state-of-the-art laboratories that has to do with the technology. So we're developing drone systems, machine vision, machine learning, AI, robotics, all of this with the idea that those technologies that are being developed will be utilized by local farmers, not only for vertical farming. So this is what we have in mind. This is part of our giving back to the community where we operate, and also of localizing our industry by giving it a more Middle Eastern and responding to this specific ecosystem of agriculture.
I'm just going to say, when Fadi was at the Pepsi event, I was walking by, he was talking to someone, and he was saying coriander, parsley, and something. It sounded like he was giving somebody a recipe. So I said, are you giving somebody a recipe? He's like, no, these are the things we
These
grow.
are the things that we're actually researching and trying to grow on our shelves.
Right.
So it's a new type of produce that's not commonly used in the US.
That's what I was trying to go with. That is that, you know, there's the Middle Eastern aspect of it is, you know, you have to sort of produce things that local communities want to eat. True. So, you know,
Yes.
there's a lot of work to be done in just in that space
Yes,
to make sure
indeed,
that you're growing
indeed.
those. Naji, talk to us a little bit about where you think innovation is going and how you make water conservation better for the future.
Well, look, I mean, the way we handle R&D is through a collaborative approach. You know, we work with a lot of, you know, with varied stakeholders in a partnership format and model to generate and innovate. You know, we call this the innovation ecosystem, and from which, you know, we've in the past been able to generate creative ideas, innovative ideas that then led to innovative technologies, which then ultimately is used fundamentally to promote the reuse of water and to prevent the loss of water. And so a lot of these have been through universities, even with schools. I mean, even tomorrow, I believe, Carlotta, if I'm not wrong, we have an event here at the Pavilion with something we call Xylem Ignite, which is a project that we do with schools, whereby you know, young kids, students who have brilliant out-of-the-box ideas come up with these solutions for water. You know, water touches us all, and we all think about it. And you would be surprised to some of the ideas that get generated, and some of them historically have made their way into our portfolio. And I think tomorrow we have a prize, or we have a recognition ceremony to at least 3 of the students that we worked with that generated really interesting ideas that we would like to push forward and take to the next step. But also, in a more serious manner, you know, we work with organizations, for instance, such as, and you know, we do look at R&D from a global perspective, but we work with organizations such as PUB, which is the Singapore utility company. You know, historically, we've worked very closely with PUB to generate a lot of the products under what we call the Xylem View, which is the digital suite. You know, a lot of what you spoke about earlier, you know, in the ability to design digital twins, have intelligent systems and artificial intelligence working on pipeline networks, water pipeline networks, to help optimize and render efficient a lot of it. So, you know, historically, this is how we've generated a lot of these ideas. You know, some of them, like I mentioned earlier, with the X-Purify around the moss situation, that came through a conversation with DIWA. And again, their objective to try to minimize the loss of water and promote reusage. So that was one of the ideas that came from that conversation. Tomorrow, or day after tomorrow, we're launching a product line here as well in the US Pavilion. We've been making good use of the US Pavilion. That has more to do with dewatering applications. You know, the problem with water is you always want to move it somewhere else, either to send it to people to use it or send it away from people because it's flooding everywhere. Some of these ideas, or you know, that product line, in part also came through. I don't know if some of you have been in Dubai for the last 2 or 3 years. You know, you do remember the time when there was this very serious storm that caused the shutdown of Dubai Airport.
Yeah.
You know, we were called in to work with Dubai airports and the aviation authorities to see how we can avoid that in the future again. So, you know, there's been a lot of investments that went into the ground around the airport facilities, and also through some of the dewatering applications that were requested from us, you know, allowed us to generate, you know, new innovations and new ideas around new products. And again, that's something that we're going to launch in a couple of days.
Oh, great stuff. Look forward to participating and finding out more about that. Susan, talking about localization and, you know, when we talk to the UAE government and the officials here, the real focus of the UAE is to bring technology here and to create partnerships and to educate and create an ecosystem that is innovative and is finding solutions for the future. Talk to us a little bit about localization of technology and how you're partnering in the region. Doesn't have to be UAE specific, but
Sure.
what you're thinking for the future.
Right. So it probably helps to kind of describe how we approach technology at Jacobs. My water team, you mentioned we're 9,000 folks across the globe. We have a team called Solutions and Technology. And Solutions and Technology are folks that's what they do. They are technologists. They have deep domain knowledge. We have a team here in the Middle East that represents us, so they bring that knowledge of what's happening locally. They're also connected across the world to all the rest of the water technologists that we have. Actually, the head of Solutions and Technology is right here in this region, Marianne Kervin. So any tough questions, you can ask Marianne those questions. So, but that connectivity is how we do it. And being able to reach out at any time, we kind of have a way that we say it is like 3 calls. You call me, I understand what the issue is. I'll call you, and you'll say, okay, my team can handle this, and then you'll tell Marianne to solve the problem. That's how it works, and it does work. But it is because we can reach out across the world and bring a solution, but we bring the solution that has worked elsewhere, working with the local team that knows what's going on here. That is really the key. So when we innovate with something, say we're doing it in our Glasgow office in Scotland, that works there. The team here then will look at that and say, okay, well, what is specific to the Middle East? What is local? What is different? From a water standpoint, the question is it too much water? Is it too little water? What are the regulations that we're trying to deal with? What are the local customs that we're trying to deal with? But so our solutions and technology teams are how we make that happen.
Thank you, Susan. Before I turn it over for questions from the audience, one last question for all of you. We are planning to be, I'm being interviewed on Dubai TV later this week, talking about U.S. innovation in water. And they want, obviously we are showcasing U3 companies in our discussion. Give me a takeaway that if you had to tell me one thing that what Jacobs stands for, that you bring to the region, and that everyone in this room, in this city, in this country, in this region should be excited about partnering with you. One thing from you, Susan, and then Fadi, and then Naji.
One, water. All water has value. The challenges that we're facing today are complex and interconnected. And the solutions that we bring forward have got to be sustainable, inclusive, and equitable.
Thank you. Fadi.
High quality greens produced in a sustainable way and contributing to the food security of this country.
Fantastic.
Well, if you want to solve water, you talk to us. But no, look, we are an American company that is local. We have a state-of-the-art manufacturing facility right here in Dubai that's producing a lot of the great products and technologies that we put to use. And local governments and local utilities know that. And we have, the R&D component that comes to it, the integrated services that come with it. We're here. We're here to help. We're here to assist, and we're here to solve water challenges.
Fantastic. Questions from the audience. We have time for a couple of questions. We can pass the mic around. Well, somebody's got to ask a couple of questions. I know you all have some. No pressure. No pressure. Here.
Well, Mustafa Khamis from the American University of Sharjah. Well, I really enjoyed the panel. It's a really nice topic, and everyone is really presenting really challenging and very nice solution for the future. Now, the question is for the water treatment and reuse in agriculture. You know that in the Middle East, we are really exposed to this type of idea. And as you know, wastewater can be divided to 2 to 3 types, which is black water, you have gray water, and you have storm water in general, okay? Now, the problem is not every water can be used for irrigation. And there is some regulations that imposes on water reuse for specific crops. So what do you think in that regard? And that's for the xylem. And what do you think about the water quality that you are coming with to irrigate certain crops? Are you looking into this subject? And thank you very much.
To be honest, we haven't done so much around agriculture per se, but we've done a lot with municipalities around landscaping applications. And we do have a suite of technologies that we've put to use, online analyzers and continuous analysis of water quality, in addition to certain disinfection units like UV lights and oxygenation or ozonation. And that allows us to generate the water quality that could be used for, I don't want to say agriculture, but landscaping applications. And it has been used extensively. Most of the water today that is used for landscaping applications in the UAE in particular is reused water.
Fadi, maybe you have something to say about, what kind of water you can use in your
In fact,
agriculture.
yeah, but the question is more generic about overall agriculture. For aeroponic technologies, we're very keen on the quality of water, so we have an RO station inside our facility, so everything is treated to an RO level. But we're also looking into alternative technologies. RO is pretty expensive and consuming from a power and the membrane. So we're looking into plasma technologies recently, and we'll see where this goes.
Okay. For Susan?
Well, this is really nice, feedback from your company, which is the Aerofarm. Now, when you are using, the reverse osmosis treatment of your water and so on, there's a brine generated from that. And this brine really salty.
No, we're not desalinating, okay? We're taking the water from the grid, from the utilities, and we're retreating it again to a level where it's sufficient for our type of operations.
So you are microfiltration, not
Yes.
reverse osmosis. So
Yes.
because see, there is some kind of brine that are generated.
No, we
Will
don't.
make it really more
Yes,
harmful.
we're not producing salt.
Okay, thank you very much.
Susan, do you have a couple things to say about
I'll leave it to
agriculture?
those two. I
Leave
think
those
they
two.
handled
Okay.
that quite well.
Matthew?
Hi, thank you for being here today. Matthew Sada, Deputy Commissioner at the Pavilion. Xylem, thank you for your support. It's one of our sponsors. I wanted to ask a question about consumer behavior. Your example about the 1 liter for lettuce versus the 1,000 liters for lettuce, like that really struck me. And, when I go to the grocery store or whatever, I'm not looking at water consumption for various fruits and vegetables or any products. And so what efforts are underway to think about how we inform consumers, and even if most of your things are happening elsewhere, how do you bring consumers into it to help to change their behavior or to raise awareness at the grocery store or elsewhere that can have then follow-on effects in kind of the more industrial side as well? So anything you can share about educating consumers about water consumption?
Yes, in fact, there's 2 trends that are taking place in the world, specifically in the Emirates or the wider GCC, where it's very developed and it's being highly urbanized, from Dubai, Abu Dhabi to Riyadh and elsewhere. So people want to eat healthy food, so they're very conscious, and this awareness about the quality of food that they consume is growing. The second aspect is these are rich areas, and people have the tendency to go and overspend buying food, and there's lots of food wastage on the other end. So the original value proposition of Aerofarms in the US was that we want to localize the production in order to save the environment. After selling greens around the East Coast for the past year and so, we have realized the statistics that came back realized 3 different things from what we had on the drawing board. People will always look for something that tastes good, and they go back to buy it again. So it's about taste and quality. Second, it's about pricing, and we have positioned our produce to be on par with organic produce, so it's not even a penny more expensive. And thirdly, it's localization and this level of awareness. Okay? People will not take the extra step just to buy something local if it does not taste well and if the pricing is not proper. So this is something that we have learned, and I guess it's going to be implemented wherever we go. So part of why we're only growing 30 types of leafy greens is because we managed to bring the economics of unit production to be able to be profitable and competing. The other, whatever, 18 type of products, we're still working on that until we reach certain economies of scale that would allow us to put to the market at that same price.
But do your marketing materials reflect the fact that you have this drastic reduction in amount of water use? Like, is that something that you can use in actually the marketing campaign materials?
I guess it could, specifically in this part of the world. In the US, the marketing is definitely highlighting the lack of pesticides, lack of chemicals, lack of herbicides, and it says that you can eat from the clamshell without even washing. So.
Any more questions? One more question?
Hi, I'm Martina from Aspire. I head up research for the Abu Dhabi government under the Science Office of Aspire. I spent 30 years at the University of California, Davis. So I'm sure you gather where my roots are, literally. I've just launched 2 institutes, one in sustainability and the other in food security. And I'd like to ask this panel what they think my researchers should focus on, the most important considerations they should focus on specifically for those 2 challenges in Abu Dhabi. Thank you.
I think that's a great question to end things on. So each of you can offer your advice.
Did you say sustainability and food security?
Yes,
is that what you?
2 separate institutes. The sustainability one is very energy focused, but it absolutely is focusing on water protection as well. And the food security one clearly is looking at sustainable production of food. So they're quite related. They're among our institutes.
Well, look, I mean, if I want to touch on everything you just mentioned, I guess, this is one of the areas with the largest carbon footprint per capita in the world. So any energy consumption that is not hydrocarbon-based, any studies around that are always very welcome. There has been, and maybe that also answers a little bit the gentleman's question about how to market this stuff, right? That reminds me of the solar power conversations that used to happen a decade ago, where people felt, they had the altruistic need or want to kind of use solar power, but then the economics were not there to help them to make it happen. Well, today it is, thanks to institutes like yours. Today we are able to generate power from solar source in this part of the world a lot cheaper than from a hydrocarbon source. So it's no longer a trade-off that you have to worry about. It happens automatically. That's a decision that makes financial sense as well. So any topics around those lines, always very welcome. That's the same for water. Again, water is one of the most valuable commodities in the world in general, but specifically in this part of the world. It's also expensive. People pay a lot of money for their water consumption. So, obviously any studies that have to do with, again, we spoke earlier about the reuse of water, about the prevention of water loss, about the ability to recycle, always welcome. And please come and talk to us about some of those ideas. We'd be happy to assist. So, and then food security, I'll leave it to the expert next to me.
In fact, I wanted to highlight the aspects of sustainability, because food security is social sustainability. So it falls under social sustainability. So there's 3 legs to the sustainability thing. First is the environmental leg, which covers land. Specifically, perhaps it's not our land in our vicinity, but we're saving certain forests from being cut in order to cultivate certain meat or crops in order to export it here. So the way we change our behavior would definitely change the landscape use and would maintain some biodiversity. So that's one leg. The other leg is water. I think we have beaten that subject to death. And And the third aspect is energy, and this is really a big question for this region. So all our electricity or source comes from fossil fuel burning. So the question of renewables, the question of solar and the adoption of solar or wind sources, this is definitely something to look into. Vertical farming, whether aeroponic or other technologies, we consume lots of power, and we really love to have alternative sources than just fossil fuel, because it brings our carbon footprint even lower. Although we are carbon negative, we consume carbon dioxide inside our facilities. So that's the environmental aspect. And there's, of course, the economic sustainability, which is we want to reach a level where those sustainable initiatives are profitable, well-sustained, and technologies can keep up with the evolution around them, so that there's investments and there's interest in it. So the agriculture and agri-tech, I think it's still very early on in its development, and there's lots of areas to look into. We are teaming with NYU for certain things. We are teaming with the UAE University in Al Ain. We're working with Nokia Lab to develop drones for the fields. We're working with Cargill for local nurseries, to enhance local nurseries. We signed an MOU with Silal in Abu Dhabi a couple of weeks ago. So we're trying to really penetrate the fabric of this region to pick up what's really needed so that we could focus our efforts on that. And it's all around sustainability.
That's amazing stuff, Fadi, because I think that's what Emiratis are going to be the most excited. The UAE government is so excited about all, the sort of bringing innovation here. One last word from you.
All right.
I know Naji wants to say something. You'll
Okay.
get the last word.
Well, first of all, kudos for UC Davis. That's pretty cool. And it's bigger than water. I think that's what I would say to you, is that we can talk about how one water, we can talk about how we can bring technology, but water is life. And so when you think sustainability and you think food security, I think you have to think social equity, and you have to think how are we building livable communities, and how do we, but the engineer in me says to you, if we're going to do that, we got to quit putting water in silos, and we have to have a systems thinking thought process, and if we can get to that, then we will be able to solve these problems.
Naji, last word?
No, maybe one more dimension of worth studying, and that's around legislation, not necessarily around technology. It just hit me when Fadi was talking. In that facility that I spoke about earlier, our power is all. Sustainability is a big thing at Xylem, and we have stated goals and published goals, and I think we're kind of ahead of the goals that we've put to ourselves. But the power that we consume in our facility is all renewable power, solar power. And in fact, we have excess. We have too much of it that today goes to waste. We're not able to use it. We're not even able to give it to somebody like Fadi to use it, because the legislation does not allow it. And so that's kind of a bit of a wastage there. So I think because energy usage in general is a monopoly in the UAE, I think it limits a lot of the ability to work in more sustainable ways around energy in particular. So.
Well, I'm just going to say we might have beaten water to death. I don't think so. I think we've just scratched the surface. It's a fascinating conversation. I'm even more excited about solving water and learning more about Aerofarms and the work that you're doing. Exactly, I will do that. And Jacobs, as always, I was inspired on Monday. The inspiration continues today. Thank you so much. Round of applause for the panelists. Hopefully good conversations can happen, and we can find better partnerships.
Thank you.
Thank you.